Hello, my name is Joe Cartwright and welcome to my studio. Today we're going to be looking at how to paint dark cliffs and dark rocks. This subject can be quite difficult because of the subtle differences in tones, and in particular when you have darker rocks in the distance and lighter ones in the foreground. So let me begin with a simple drawing. I'm going to mark in some of the darker shapes, but I'm not going to try and draw in every little crevice in the rocks. Basically just trying to get the feel of these rocks without spending too much time on the detail. In the reference, this sand is quite wet, but I'm going to have more of a transition between the water, the damp sand and the dry sand. And this is all I need to do for this drawing. As usual, I'll turn it over and wet the back. Okay, let's mix some colours. Some cobalt blue for the sky, a turquoisey green for the water, some sort of brown for the sand, and that'll get us started. That'll do for the sky. For the water, we'll start with some cobalt turquoise. and I'll modify that as I paint. So for the sand, we'll mix some raw umber with a small amount of burnt sienna because the sand's relatively reddish. Might mix a bit more of that. Let's go back and add more water to our paper. As you can see, the paper is still cockled, which says it can absorb more water. We'll begin with the sky. Just using the side of the brush to create the impression of some clouds in the distance. Then pick up some very weak cad orange. And a small amount of permanent rose. There's a lot of glitter and foam on the water, so I have to keep that in mind. I'm going to start by painting the distant water. And then I'm going to begin with very quick brush strokes to put in some glitter. Because my turquoise is not very strong at the moment, I can modify it with other colours quite easily. Quick dry brush strokes, that'll do. Now, here I can see some of the sand under the water, so I'll pick up some raw sienna. And I'll darken some of this by adding some more cobalt turquoise and some cobalt blue. And I'll add that to some of the deeper water. I'll dull some of it with some burnt sienna. And I can use that to indicate some rocks under the water. Now, pick up some of this paint and take most of it out of the brush, and I'm just very lightly run it across some of these bigger pale patches. It's good. Now as I come forward, I'm going to add some more burnt sienna, a little bit more raw umber. Leave a few little gaps on the paper. Some of those will turn into rocks later, some might be just left as foam. Now I'll pick up some cobalt blue, again not too much on my brush, and I want to run that near this edge. So this gives us the damp sand and the dry sand. Just lifting a few more gentle highlights. Good. Okay, go and dry that, and then we can get started on the rocks. We'll now mix some colours for the rocks. Here I pick the basic colour of the rocks without the dark shadows. In this case they're going to be mixed with burnt sienna and French ultramarine. So burnt sienna, more French ultramarine. And the rocks in the foreground are quite a bit warmer than these ones in the distance. So I'll just use this as a base, but we'll add more French ultramarine to it. I'll add some raw sienna as well, because it's a more yellowish rock than the one in the distance. That's better. We'll start with this rock over on this side. It's a bit too light. Add more French ultramarine, more burnt sienna. Just leaving some white paper there to indicate the foam. These rocks are similar, they're not that far apart. Just adding some variation to the rock colour, a bit of raw sienna. Just changing the shape of this rock just to make it look a little bit more interesting. Hinting at some of the crevices. Now, you'll see that I've painted this rock to that stage and I've left it sitting there. And the reason I did that is I want to give this paint time to stain that paper so that when I paint this next section here, while some of that paint will flow into it, enough will stay there that it gives a hint of that edge there. With watercolour, timing is very important. I have to wait and give that some time to again do what I did here. So you can see at this stage how that edge, while some of this paint has flowed into it, you can still see that hint of that edge there. If you don't give the paint time to settle, you'll just create one rock. So that's really quite important. Now this rock here is generally lighter than these rocks here, so that's why I've got this colour here. Add some more raw sienna to it. And I'm leaving a few little highlights there. I'll be able to use them later. go back to my size 8 brush. I've done all of this with my size 12 brush up to now. And I'm going to just drag some of this paint into the water and hint at some reflections. And I'm exaggerating these reflections because I think they'll help the composition. Now I'll pick up some of this dark paint here, add more paint to it. Clean my brush and take out about maybe 95% of the water. And I'm going to lift some of this paint just to lighten it where it needs to be. I think this could be a lighter tone. Because these rocks in the distance are going to be lighter than similar rocks in the foreground. This rock here would be lighter in tone than this one here, for instance. You have to do this while the rock has some good shine on it. And I try to lift the paint in the direction of the rock, so later when I put in some more detail, all the marks are heading in the same or similar direction. Now, while that's drying, along this water's edge where you have foam, you'll have a very tiny shadow running along that edge. All I do for that is mix some shadow colour. Typically I use French ultramarine, a little bit of permanent rose, tiny bit of burnt sienna just to dull it off a fraction. Take out most of the paint from my brush. And that leading edge of the foam quite often will have a little shadow there. And there'll be some shadows within the foam, and it'll be darker in some areas than others. Under some of these highlights, I'll paint a rock and leave the top as a little highlight. And some I'll leave as some glitter. Then I'll just hint at a little shadow. And that helps connect those rocks to the sand. Just going to throw in some marks hinting at seaweed or something like that, just to add some activity in this area. Alright, I'm now going to go and dry this so I can finish these rocks. Key thing to keep in mind is the crevices in the distance, or the dark shadows in the distance, are going to be lighter in tone and a little bit cooler, meaning they lean a little bit more to the blue than the darkest crevices in the foreground. Okay, and that'll help add some depth to our painting. So I'm going to start by mixing a dark blue-grey colour, a very neutral grey, almost a black, but leaning just a tiny bit to blue. Make it a little bit stronger. I don't want a lot of paint in my brush. Now, when you're taking paint out of your brush, one of the ways you do that is by dragging it through the edge of your palette. Sometimes you can also just run your brush over the paper just to get rid of some of that paint. Other times you can just tap a towel. I keep a towel beside my left hand because I'm right-handed, and I quite often just pick it up and just tap it like that when I don't want too much paint in my brush. So you're always adjusting the amount of paint in your brush. In this case, I actually want a bit more paint in my brush, so I'll just start with the shape of the dark crevices. Again, I'm not including all of them. Then I'll take my brush, take out most of the paint, and then I look at the rock and see which direction the crevices run. And just some quick dry brush strokes. Always got to watch where you put your hand. Just quick brush strokes in the direction of some of the crevices. Vary their tones. And we'll do the same over here. So by having similar tones in these two rocks, it places them at about the same distance away. Drag some crevices out of the dark shapes I've already painted. Now we'll work on this rock here, so it's closer, or I'm going to make it become closer to us, so I'm going to darken these crevices. How do I do that? Well, I've already got this mix of paint here, which I've been using for these dark crevices there. Now I'm going to add more paint to it. And immediately I know that these dark areas are going to be darker in tone because I haven't added any more water to that mix. I've added a little bit more burnt sienna than French ultramarine so that these crevices are going to be fractionally warmer than these ones over here. Now this dark shape is sharp edged here, but this side is soft edged because this rock is curved. Quick dry brush strokes just to add some texture. Don't try and put in every mark, however. We have to add more detail in this rock here because it's the closest rock to us. And I'll pick up some of this darker paint and just dab into some of these flatter shadow shapes. Now, if you wanted to add more texture, you could also pick up a piece of a credit card and scrape some highlights out of areas. This doesn't particularly need it, but I'm going to do it just to show you. Just a very small amount of almost pure paint on my brush. Barely touching the paper. Then along the water's edge, you get the odd bit of glitter happening. So I'll just get my credit card. And ideally you leave that as white paper if you can, but it doesn't matter, the credit card does the job. Just little flicks. Make sure they're not all the same or too straight. And you can always use some gouache if you want to. All right, I'll go and dry that. Off screen, I've re-wet parts of the back of the paper and the board because the paper had started to lift. Now, I want to establish this distant horizon line a bit better. So I'll use some of this now dirty cobalt turquoise. Got a little dot there which will become a bird in a minute. In fact, let's do that now. This rock here is just a little bit too light for my liking. So what I'm going to do now is give it a glaze. A glaze is where you paint over a particular section with a wash. just very quick like that. Clean my brush. Then if I need to, I can lift the odd little highlight. I'm going to darken some of this water in this area here. So I've got this turquoise. I'm just going to add some more water to it. And these are just little adjustments you make once you've done the bulk of your painting. Quick brush strokes to leave some glitter or semi-glitter. Going to mix a little bit more of my shadow colour. That's better. Now I'm going to dry this because I want to put in one or two more hard edges there, and then it'll be finished. Dry that. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a like. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. And if you are able, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I look forward to seeing you for the next one.